superstitious writing on the wall. When you believe in things you don't understand, Lubie, there's superstitious writing on the wall. They were carrying the chalk players out in body bags last night. NBA viewers, nobody could have believed this. You would have to think that there was some kind of bizarre underworld conspiracy that was involved in last night's Boston Celtics loss. Now, if you were betting on the game, I hope you had the Cleveland Cavaliers on the money line. You were getting plus 650. You had to lay $1,000 to win 100 if you like the Celtics to win the game straight up without the points, which were rather generous, Lubie. Were they not dangling that carrot in front of you yesterday and saying, bet the Cavaliers? They just lost by 25, but we'll give you 13 and a hook. That's what they were giving you last night on this game. It might have gone down to 13. That's a very generous offering. And yet it seemed perfectly conceivable that the Celtics would blow through the Cleveland Cavaliers once again. We'll get into that. But if you are betting the games, BetOnline is your number one source for all summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, which I love betting, by the way. I love betting golf. It's fantastic. NBA and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores are available for you to follow your favorite teams, get all the latest inside information, the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on all the action. Bet online, where the game starts. Where do we start with this Boston Celtic thing? Is there some kind of conspiracy? Every piece of information, every piece of publicity going into this game, every narrative, every sports talk host was talking about how this couldn't be anything but blowout city. 25 points. A lot of stats were being cited about the number of 25-plus point victories that the Celtics had during the season. All you had to do, though, to determine what was going to happen, I mean, maybe this was coming out of the Winter Hill gang, some of these stats that were being put up and proliferated around to make you believe that the Celtics were invincible. But all you had to do was watch this show, and you realize the Celtics are far from invincible. In fact, if you listen to the professings of one Mike Lubitz all season long, he called us. Massive choke job at the end of the year. Porzingis going to be out. Porzingis out here for this particular series. There was no evidence, however, my friends, zero evidence. You didn't have to be some television lawyer to come up with the idea that, hey, look, Judge, there's nothing here. There's no evidence whatsoever. I don't see anything. What are you talking about? What body? There was no evidence that the Cleveland Cavaliers were going to be able to do what they did last night in Boston and wipe out the Celtics, not only eking out a victory, but running away and hiding. This was the largest margin of victory by a double-digit underdog since 1991. Cleveland 118, Boston 94. Derek White, who you've been impugning the integrity of all season long, saying, hey, what is this guy? He's nothing. Meanwhile, he's scoring like 30 a night. He goes 1 for 8 from three-point land. I think if you dug up Betty White, you could have got a better performance than you did out of Derek White. The other guys kind of did their thing. Jaylen Brown, 19. Tatum was the high scorer for the Celtics with, 25? But Donovan Mitchell was getting lucky. He's banking shots from straight away, didn't call it, and ended up with 29 points, and the Cleveland Cavaliers run away and hide. Where does that leave us, Lubie? Does it leave us, do we suspend the belief that the Celtics, you never thought they were invincible. You thought they were a garbage team that was eventually going to be exposed as having massive flaws, and yet they were better than the other garbage teams that were coming out of the East. So what do we think after last night's game?
I never said garbage. I think they're a good team. I don't think they're what the national media has made them. I think they have a lot of flaws. I think they have a lot of holes. And I think it starts with the two best players. Look, Tatum had a good game last night, but for large parts of last night, he was nowhere to be found. In the first half, he didn't do anything. And then I guess he woke up in the second half. Brown actually sort of carried them. And Pritchard made a few open threes and kept them hanging around. I've said this going into the playoffs, like the Cavs and the Pacers have nice young teams. The problem is the word young. And so often these young guys get into these big moments and they just sort of shy away and don't live up to it. And that's the Evan Mobley I've been looking for the last two fucking playoffs. Like when I picked the Cavs last year to beat the Knicks in 5, it was because I thought that Evan Mobley would be there. He's young, he's athletic, he can play both ends of the floor, and he's comfortable with the ball in his hands, and he's comfortable without the ball in his hands. And it was like, where is this kid that all regular season last year and this year was really good, and in the playoffs fell off? Well, he was there last night. He was there before Mitchell was there. I mean, he played really well early on in that game, and it sort of eased them into it to the point where the Celtics, even when they had their runs, the Cavs weren't shell shocked. The Cavs hung around. And whatever the refs tried to do, the Cavs didn't give a shit. The Cavs weren't going to let the refs be a factor in that game, even though they tried. And it didn't, and they just controlled all of it. And Donovan Mitchell, it wasn't all about Donovan Mitchell for once. Donovan Mitchell for a lot of that game was Donovan Mitchell. I didn't think he got like his 12th point in the middle of the third quarter, and they were winning by 7. I'm like, how the fuck? I'm like, good. I'm like, it's about time for him to, because they have talent on that roster. They're really young, and it was nice to see them go toe to toe. Because that's the problem. It's not that Tatum and Brown have been killing them. It's been Derek White and whoever the fuck, like you can't even let Derek White kill you. And they didn't. Finally, they were in his face. They got defended the 3-point line last night the way I've been looking for them to defend the 3-point line the entire playoffs, the Cleveland Cavaliers, including the Orlando Magic, who they hang around way too long in that series.
A serious unforeseen result, you would have to say.
It was
I mean, the way they staggered around with the Magic and barely eked it out in 7 games, and then getting clobbered by 25 in game 1 in Boston and having to go back out there in the TD Garden and try and do it again against the Celtics. Could you possibly have seen them? I mean, you had to have some serious. You had to be able to say "fuck the favorites" in both games last night, and you had to have a lot of courage. That was one of those ones where they called the casino manager over. Hey Mo, Cavs money line. How much you want to take on that? Whatever he's got. Okay, no problem. We'll take it all. And they look at you and they hand you the receipt, and they're trying to suppress their laughter as they give you the ticket. The Dallas game was less of a surprise, although the way that Oklahoma City performed in game number 1, you would have thought Dallas would have had a difficult time taking game 2, much less controlling game 2. They win at 119-110. So that series now evened up at 1 apiece. This is the big story in New York is the Knicks and the Pacers go for game 3 tonight. And they got a picture here of Rick Carlisle crying because they are seriously offended by the idea that he even remotely suggested that officiating is having anything to do with the outcome of this series.
Yeah, they're not watching the games.
Now, you straight up robbed him in fucking game 1. I mean, just straight up took it away. Adam Silver, once again, we haven't seen Adam Silver. Where is he? Is there a search warrant for this guy? Where's his commentary? Enough of these veiled apologies in the 2-minute report where they say, our officials are blind as a fucking bat. We really stole one from these guys. Watch us do it again tonight. That's the way this thing should be reported. But instead, and Carlisle makes an innocuous comment about, well, you know what, the small market teams don't necessarily get the favoritism that some of the major market teams do when it comes to calls. And they submit a thing with like 75 blown calls in the same game.
I mean, look, and for all the Knick people who are trying to ignore it and feel good about this team that is not as good as they want it to be. It's not like the Pacers do that every game. The Pacers just played a whole series. They have a long history of being in the playoffs before the last few years. They never did that before. Like, there's a reason they did it. And I know my Knick fan friends are totally delusional. They have this weird fucking idea that they were a championship contender. And what team are you watching? Like, if you've watched the Thunder and the Nuggets and the T-Wolves and even the Celtics, and you watched the Knicks, like, the Sixers were at death's door. Embiid put up really good numbers. He couldn't fucking move. The fact that he put up really good numbers makes 0 sense. He couldn't move. And that team took you to 6. And you were healthy in that series. Like, I don't want to hear, like, well, if we weren't hurt. Believe me, you being hurt means nothing. Your team's average. You got lucky that everyone in the East got hurt, and it opened it up for you, and now you're getting hurt. That's just desserts. Good luck.
You obviously didn't read today's New York Post.
Yeah, the Post.
They're all over this. Brunson is the greatest player that ever suited up. He may not. I guess he's questionable for tonight's game, which is kind of interesting.
He played the whole second half, and he looked fine. Don't give me that. Well, this little. No, there's nothing wrong with him. So if he's missing, it's because he's soft. Because the dude played a whole half and was fine. Half and was fine. And the refs are clearly involved in that series. And every game the Knicks have played, the refs are involved. Is it a conspiracy theory? I don't know. I don't talk about shit like that because I have no idea. I do know it's clear. Every game the Knicks have played in, they've gotten benefit of the doubt massively, including in game 2 versus Sixers that they were handed, and game 1 versus the game 1 of this series versus the Pacers, they were handed.
Where's Adam Silver on all of this? I mean, is he negotiating the release of the hostages with Hamas? Where is he that he's too busy to say something about what the hell is going on out there? And Rick Carlisle getting hammered for this. Carlisle's one of those guys that you don't see complaining a whole hell of a lot. I mean, he rarely says anything of any controversial nature. And then beyond that, who even knew he was the coach of Indiana until you started seeing a little more of that in-season tournament, and the Pacers were doing well. And he said, "Yeah, that's Rick Carlisle. He's still around." He does. He really does look like the guy that works in the funeral home. That is the second guy that you are approached by. First guy comes in, and then the family gets emotional, and they're talking about what the various arrangements are going to be. And of course, always the question is how much. And so before they deliver the bad news to you, they soften you up with a guy who seems like he's really caring. And then in comes Rick Carlisle, and he's kind of the cooler. He's like Fu, the blackjack dealer from Cambodia that comes to the table there. And as soon as you see the Asian dealer coming up with the stick man or the pit boss, get the fuck out of there. You want to get up from that table and run. Carlisle is that guy that you could see in the funeral home that looks like he's been gargling with embalming fluid all afternoon. And then he comes out there and he says, I can really sympathize and empathize with what you're feeling right now. But by the way, this is going to cost you $80,000 to bury this prick that everybody hated. You might consider cremation. And that's what happened to the Chalk players last night. They got annihilated in both games. Carlisle crying, and we'll see if it has any impact on the way the game is officiated tonight. I would doubt it, although officiating wasn't overwhelmingly controversial. I didn't think in game two. And yet, here's Carlisle and the Indiana Pacers, and they submitted a tape that even has Larry Bird getting fouled. Unbelievable. I mean, it was crazy that contention that they could have blown 78 calls. But I think if you look at it on every possession, probably it's just like in football where you could call holding or some kind of penalty on virtually every snap.
Yeah.
Same thing is true in the NBA if you really want to get to the point where you're nitpicking things like they did with that Miles Turner screen, which is why that whistle should have been swallowed. They should be doing an operation on one of those three officials today to see if they can release that thing from his stomach before it causes further damage. But yeah, a lot of crying back and forth there. And the Knicks fans are taking offense that Indiana even mildly suggested that there was something amiss with the officiating so far in the postseason.
It's been a joke. Josh Hart literally is an average rebounder. He's now all of a sudden Moses Malone on the offensive glass. Like, he literally leapfrogs dudes every time. And I'm watching him going, even if you don't want to call fouls, you should just logically go, this 6'4" guy should not be out rebounding a 7-foot person who has position. I wonder how he could have gotten that ball.
Yeah.
Like, it's just
Hart could be one of those guys, unfortunately, in New York that's pushing people onto the tracks at the subway station.
Yeah.
That's the kind of force he's using with that elbow in the back underneath the boards. Hockey last night, the Rangers overtime. They take a 3-0 lead over Carolina. Carolina was our secret sleeper team to win the Stanley Cup. And then we found out how embarrassing that thought was because Carolina was installed as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup. That appears to be dissipating quickly. Any idea that you're going to cash that ticket as the Rangers go up 3-0. Well-contested game again last night. Rangers deadly on the power play, killing power plays. They've been great in that aspect. And Lavalette has them playing excellent hockey, 7-0 so far in the postseason through 2 rounds. They haven't lost a game yet. And Dallas rebounds and beats Colorado 5-3 in the other series. So they knocked that one up at 1 apiece. Tonight, a bloodbath. Panthers and the Bruins. What is your anticipation there, Mike Lubitz? Do they start fighting before the puck hits the ice? Would that be appropriate to just have all 10 guys drop the gloves right there as soon as the game gets underway? Get it out of the way. Be assessed as many penalty minutes as you possibly can, and then go out and play the game. But 1-1, certainly you could say it's a fair statement to assess this as a pivotal game 3. And we'll see which way it goes. I mean, blowouts each way, domination each way. Looked like the Panthers fell asleep in the second half of that game from about the midway point of the second period on, game number 1. And the same could be said about the Boston Bruins. They caved in and just completely disintegrated in terms of all aspects of the game, except for the fighting in game number 2. So we'll see what happens there. Some bad blood developing. And you have the Oilers and the Canucks. The Canucks managed to come back from a 4-1 deficit. You don't usually see that. And they took game 1 of that series by a 5-4 count. So that should be interesting to watch as well. Much being made. What did you think of this top and dunk? Did you see that? The OB top and dunk where he goes through his legs and jams one home. Indiana was on a run. Obviously, it's high risk if you're going to do a dunk that you might miss in the slam dunk contest with nobody guarding you and all the time in the world to compose yourself. He had missed one in the regular season attempting that against the Knicks. there's reason to believe that Toppin would want to kind of stick it in the Knicks' face since he was drafted by the Knicks as a lottery pick. Didn't really see eye to eye with Tom Thibodeau, which seems to be the case with many players. Wasn't his type of guy. And eventually got himself traded to the Indiana Pacers, where he's made nice contributions and seems to be well respected. But do you do a showboat dunk in the middle of a postseason game? And then, while celebrating, the Knicks came down, and within a split second, they put up a three because there were two Pacers at the other end of the court going, look at me. So what do you think, Lubie? Is that an example of how youth is wasted on the young? Where the Pacers right there could easily be up 2-0 in this series, just as easily as down 2-0. But are they too young for the moment? Was that a
I think they are, but I don't
play
think
where you thought, wow, first of all, you shouldn't be attempting a showboating play. And secondly, don't stand there and celebrate while the other team is at the other end of the court scoring in a game that you ultimately lost by 4 points.
No, I mean, I don't. Phil Mushnick is such an old fart. Like, who cares about that shit? That screams Phil Mushnick. That even who first of all,
He was not happy about it. Let's put it that way. That's not where I got that from.
I heard no one referencing that. So that's either Mushnick or some other old cadre that writes for the Knicks. Like, that's what's funny. But the Post has become the Knicks tabloid. For as honest as the New York media is, when their New York teams are good, they forget that they are human beings. They treat them like they're gods. I didn't even notice that fucking play. I don't care about that guy.
Oh, it was great. It was spectacular.
Look, if in the playoffs you can't afford to give up any points, so I don't give a shit if they celebrate bat flips in baseball or back flips in basketball and football. Just get down and play fucking defense. Okay,
yeah,
that's my problem. Like, I don't mind when they complain about calls, but when you're complaining about calls and allowing a guy to dunk, then it didn't matter if you got the call. You gave up 2 points, so it wouldn't have mattered either way. Get back and play fucking defense. The Pacers are 100% too young for the moment, but I don't think it's because of a showboating dunk. We've seen LeBron do stuff like that. We've seen Jordan in the playoffs do some of his craziest plays were plays that, if you look at the highlights of them, are showboating. No one criticized Michael Jordan for
nobody said anything about the doctor when he used to wave the ball in the air there and bounce it off the top of the backboard.
But that one play where he goes around, that's one of the iconic plays. He probably could have gone straight up and fucking dunked it. When he goes around the ring.
Oh yeah, he hangs in the air for half an hour, and that was
beautiful. It's an amazing play. It's still an offshoot of showboating. Like, basketball took another level in popularity because of showboating. It was Jordan who took took it to another level. So that's just old man.
If you were expecting George Mikan, is what you're saying, and go ahead and watch a bunch of stiffs go out there.
The three on the other end. Like, if you're gonna make a sick dunk, make the fucking dunk.
Make the dunk and run back. Exactly. Yes. That was the point of the people that were pointing at Obi Toppin and saying that maybe he should grow up a little bit and realize that there is no time for this in-game celebration when you're in a game that's going to be a nail-biter right to the end, and probably in a game where you're going to get jobbed by the officials. Anyway, big weekend on tap. A lot of good stuff. Storylines have certainly changed or taken an alternate route. I do have a good boxing match that I think is available on free TV on ESPN. I don't think it's ESPN Plus. Vasily Lomachenko, who was so highly touted as an amateur after winning Yeah, he's still going, and still very capable. And he's fighting ferocious George Kambosos, who is an Australian guy that had achieved a world championship, suffered a subsequent loss. But it's a good matchup. Our friend Brad Jacobs putting that on in Australia on ESPN. I don't know what time it'll be in Australia when they get in the ring, but I think that's going to air around 10 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States. Pretty good fight if you're a fight fan. All right, we have to run. You guys have a great weekend. All kinds of action on tap once again this week. Major League Baseball, we didn't even get into it, but you have to be loving the stories that are out there about our Miami Marlins, who we gave you on one of our gambling endeavors. Take the under on the season. That was from solid inside information. How solid was that inside information, Louis? They're ready to trade everybody now after giving up Louis Arise for a bunch of chumps. They got something back that looked like it came off the menu of Woe Hop in Brooklyn. I guess it's in Manhattan. But nonetheless, I mean, who are these guys that they're getting back as prospects? So, was this guy Bendix just brought in to sabotage the entire franchise?
It feels like Major League. Do you remember the movie Major League? Like, they want to dump everything.
They're ready to trade everybody. They're going to trade the two guys that carried them into the postseason last year as late season acquisitions, Berger and Bell, and they're ready to trade Luzardo. They're one good pitcher, who is a local kid, too. I mean, just a tremendous story, the kind of guy that any franchise would want to wrap its arms around. The kid's involved in the community, grew up here, went to Marjorie Stoneham Douglas High School, which unfortunately what was in the news and became known to people around the country for the hideous happenings of a St. Valentine's Day many years ago. I guess that was what, 5-6 years ago already. But it seems like it was just the other day. And just a perfect citizen to have on the team, unless you were going to trade late for Anthony Rizzo, who's from Parkland, Florida, and put him on the roster. You couldn't have a better local boy makes good type of story. And they're ready to back that. Anything that they could do to turn off the fans so that nobody. Yeah. Is it possible to play a game in a stadium and if nobody's there, does the game count? That'll be the question for the Marlins. All right, we got to get out of here, man. It's been a lot of fun being with you all week long. Thanks so much for tuning in. Appreciate all the support we're getting. Caffeine TV, NoFilter.net, the various other platforms. For Mike Lubie, I hope you're briefed. I'm Jeff DeForest, and thanks for tuning in to the Morning Briefing.